Welcome to Alignment Adventures. This is a podcast where we explore what it means to live a fulfilling, aligning, and present life. I'm your host, Linda Tanner, and I am so grateful that you are here. Hello, my loves, and welcome back to another episode of Alignment Adventures. I am, as always, very excited to bring you another enlightening, expansive conversation and interview with Karen Docherty. Now, what's interesting is I reflect back on last year at this time. I remember recording an episode where I was like, guys, we're going to go there this year. We're going to talk about all the things that I am personally interested in, and all the things that connect to living your most authentic, fulfilling, aligning present life. And I think Karen Docherty is such a great embodiment of that. All of my guests have been, and especially Karen. So Karen is a psychic medium and mentor that supports souls on both sides of the veil by bridging communication between the physical and non-physical worlds. So we have our first, well, I guess not our first, because Stephanie Banks was a medium and channeler, kind of the same deal, right? But we've got our first medium on the podcast. So you may or may not have heard that word before. Think of like a medium as like a channel, right? Those words are almost synonymous to me. They are the bridge that allows us to talk to the other side. And what's so interesting from this conversation is we start to realize how many of us have this ability. Essentially, all of us have this ability to tap into the non-physical. It's just a matter of slowing down and learning how to build that muscle, learning how to trust yourself. So we talk about all that on the podcast, as well as her story. So she grew up with these psychic abilities and what that was like for her, what you can get from working with a medium, like what information you can receive from doing a psychic reading. We talk about how we ourselves can connect with spirit and like the little signs that you can get, like angel numbers and seeing animals and even smelling certain smells. That happens to me all the time. I'll be on a walk and I'll like smell my grandparents' house and I know it's them with me. So we talk about how to interpret those messages, how to tell if you have psychic abilities. Like I said, I think all of us do have them to a degree, but some of us more than others. And she can actually help support you if you're someone who you think has those abilities. She has a whole process you can go through. She also talks about encountering skepticism when it comes to mediumship and psychic abilities and how you can protect your own energy. I just love this conversation. And I have to say, Karen lives in Scotland. So when she recorded this podcast, when we were talking, we were on opposite sides of the world. So how amazing is that we can talk across the world and record this conversation and spread it to all of you guys. Now, with that, I think we did have some technical difficulties listening back to it. It seemed to like cut out at points. So it may be difficult to understand her in parts, but just stick with it. I think through context, a lot of times you can understand the message. And like I've said many times before, it's more about the energy than the message itself. And this energy feels so good. So let's go ahead and get right into the conversation. I know you guys are really going to love this one. Karen, thank you so much for taking time out of your busy schedule and for coming to me halfway across the world, which is magical in itself, to be on Alignment Adventures. I know this is going to be a magical conversation, and you are such a fascinating person. So I just appreciate you and thank you for coming on.
Thank you so much for having me here. I love this.
So excited. So we'll start with the usual question. Who is Karen Docherty?
It's quite a strange question when someone asks you that, because it takes you a little moment, I think, to think, oh, what way do we go with this? But I think, really, generally speaking, anyway, being a medium really is my life. So although it's separate to a degree that Karen Docherty has her family and friends and, does all the normal things in life, one doesn't work without the other for me. So for me, my mediumship is such a huge part of everything. And it's not even about just the communication, which I know we're going to talk about, but it's about feeling the balance, and for me as a person, I need to feel that balance. It's just something that's so important. Other than that, I'm just like everyone else, just a mum and a daughter, and just trying to get on with things in life, and navigate through life in so many respects too. So it's all elements, but for me, being in alignment with me, my soul, my mediumship is everything.
Mm, so interesting. Definitely want to talk about how your life as a medium has been, because I'm sure people are fascinated by that. And I can't imagine what it's like trying to balance like a quote unquote normal life and those abilities. But before we get into that, you kind of just touched on it. But in case there's anything you want to add, what does it mean to live in alignment? You just said it means to live in alignment with your capabilities and your gift. But is there anything else on top of your awareness that you want to share on that topic?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I feel that living in alignment is more about, although it's about being aware that it's not just the physical, it's not just being in the physical element to things. So when you're in alignment, it's about feeling the energy of the other side of things. And I'm not talking at
Mm,
this point about mediumship. I mean in life, we all have to recognize that being in alignment means balance, it means calm, it means trying to navigate emotions, for instance. And I think it's a hard thing to do. It's not like we just wake up every morning and the alignment is there. It's something that we have to work at all the time, really. Especially if there's things in life that might be difficult to get through. And it takes time to realign yourself. But one thing that I've always said to myself for years and years now, is take a deep breath, realign. Because when you realign with you, with your soul, with that energy, everything changes. Your perspective changes. And you still have those emotions. You still have, the emotions that everyone else does, that might not be as aware of alignment, but it just helps you navigate them differently. It helps you cope with things differently. So for me, that alignment is so important, really, to get through your life in a positive way in the main. I know that we
mm,
can't all.
agreed. So well said. And I love the point you made about the non physical because, what people believe, whatever that is, everyone can agree that we have emotions and emotions are non physical. So, like, that is such an interesting way to look at the non physical because we all deal with that aspect of ourselves every single day. So, I definitely want to get into how you can help us deal with that non physical. But I'm sure everyone is so curious, just like an introduction of like, how did you even discover that you had these abilities? I'm imagining you've always had them to some degree, but what was that like for you growing up and really stepping into this role and your power with these abilities?
It was a really I use this word strange, and I mean it in the most positive way. But when I was growing up, I was aware of spirit, and I was aware that there was a whole other world that people didn't talk about. And that knowledge was just within me. It's not that somebody taught me that, told me that. It was just something that I always felt. And I remember being in school at about age 9, and the teacher asked us all to draw what we felt, who we felt God was, or what did God look like. And I think most of the children drew a picture of what we perceive as that image that we all see. And on my piece of paper, I just drew the outline of a person, but with no detail. And inside of the silhouette, I just said, everyone's in here. And then I said, and everyone's out there. And
Mm,
the teacher got the piece of paper and she just said, what is this? And I said, that's just what I think, that there's a different world, there's more than what we know, and that's what God is to me. Now at the
mm,
time she did just kind of feel like, that's a bit of a strange answer coming from a child, but the memory is very real for me in that moment of recognition and realizing that there is something else. And then on the flip side of that, my grandmother, my father's mother, she was mediumistic too, and I didn't know that. But
mm,
as we grew up, and talked about things more, she used to tell me things, and she used to say, oh, here's Karen, she brings spirit with her, and when I used to say to her, there was a man, in the other room last night, I could see him, she used to say, "Don't be worrying about that, that he'll never harm you." So she had an understanding of that. So
Mm,
for me, then it became a normality. It was just a normal thing for me. And then years later, the more that the spirit communication happened, so I would start to hear spirit a lot at night time, for instance, or see lots of different people coming in and out. I started to recognize that actually not everyone sees this. This is
mm,
something that is a bit different, even though it felt normal to me. And I always would equate it to maybe someone who can sing. You know, if you ask someone who can sing naturally, how did you learn to sing? They would just say, well, I just do. You know, there's
mm,
not, they can't break it down to anything. And it was the same for me. So then I had to go into development of that and recognize that I am a medium, because I didn't ever think that I was. I just thought it was a part of me. So then when I went into development, then it all made sense. And I remember feeling like almost like the penny had dropped, this
mm.
feeling of, oh, and I remember thinking, this is me, I'm home. I'm home. I know what this is. And then from then on, it just became, you know, it almost developed at its own level, and it was just my everyday life then.
I can imagine at that point where you stopped maybe like not necessarily having fear, but like running from it and just being like, okay, this is who I am and accepting it. It took on like a whole new power. And it's so interesting what you said about it, like being in families. It makes me think of like a lot of times that is a family thing. Like you see it generationally from one generation to the next. And it also makes me think of like how many children are naturally born with this and then through our modern day society just kind of get talked out of it or whatever it is.
I think that happens a lot because people don't understand it, and I think there's a bigger understanding now than there has ever been.
Mm,
Um, but I also, it is a natural thing. You are born to be a medium. It is something that you come here with from spirit.
mm,
And I think when you said like there was maybe a part that ran from it a little bit, and that's correct, because I think that you it's a big thing to think that this is what's happening, even though it felt quite natural for me, it was quite intense at the same time. That settles down, and then it's just like I say, becomes your way of life. But it does go through families, and it can skip a generation, or it can just be one person in the family that kind of carries that on. But yeah, there are a lot of children that are natural mediums that
mm,
probably won't do it. A lot of them might not do it because their path takes them somewhere else.
mm,
But it is a free will thing too. Just if I said to myself, I'm a medium, I know I'm a medium, but I don't want to do it, then spirit wouldn't be upset with me for that. That's my choice, and so we all have free will to choose that. I was just very lucky in that my grandmother made it so easy for me to know that it was true, that it helped me just to accept it when it came.
mm. So interesting and so beautiful. What a cool story. Thank you for sharing that. That makes me think you touched on something. So I want to talk about what you can go to a medium for and like how people can work with you and like what they can find out. But I'm just curious right off the top of the bat, like from working with a medium, can that help you figure out like why your soul came here? Or like maybe like what your purpose is? Is that something that comes through or not really so much?
It can, but I think that you have to be careful, because if someone came to me for that reason, I can guide them for sure. I can receive guidance for them, but you have to be very responsible as a medium. And I think that sometimes you can influence someone.
Mm,
So you've got to be so careful. The line is very thin with that. So I would tend to say to someone, I'll give you the guidance that I receive, which I always would. But please know that I can't give you all the answers, because you
mm,
just can't, because it can change the choices that person makes. It can influence their decisions, and that's not your right to do that. So you just have to be very careful in the way the guidance comes forward and what you say, but you definitely can receive guidance
mm.
along those lines.
Oh, so cool. Yeah, so let's get into that a little bit. Like what kind of guidance what comes through for people? Like what do people ask for? What kind of guidance comes through you for them that can really help them live their best lives?
So there are two. I always say there are two types of readings. One is psychic, which is more about the person sitting in front of me. It's about their life, their past, their present, and the potential for things to come. And it might be someone that's coming for a psychic reading that just needs that guidance in their life, or they're maybe trying to navigate something they're having trouble with. So that's more of a guidance kind of reading. Um, Psychic means everything that is connected to the living soul that's here, the living person that's here. Mediumship is more about the people that have crossed over. So if someone comes for that type of reading, it's about bringing evidence of that person, that they still live on and that they see things and can communicate quite clearly. And then it usually mixes, usually maybe partly psychic, partly mediumistic. It depends what the person needs, but both sides of it are a healing experience.
Mm.
So to live their best lives, if someone's in turmoil or someone needs guidance, and even if they think it's just something to do with their own life, like their profession, a job, their kids, something that's maybe upsetting them or that they're having a little bit of trouble with, to help guide someone through that is still a very healing experience for them. And it renews them, it reinvigorates them. It means that they can then have a positive outlook, because anything through mediumship in any capacity can only be positive. We are not here to tell someone something negative. It doesn't work like that. I think that people get a little bit frightened to come for a reading at times in case something bad is said or so, but it really doesn't work like that. Mediumship in its own form is to heal. And so
Mhm.
if it was a mediumistic reading where they connect with their mother in the spirit side, then that also allows them to go away feeling like they have had that contact, they've had that proof, and it kind of lifts them up and gives them that upliftment to get through the next part of their life. So it really does create this space for them to live their best life, to go forward in a more positive way.
Mm, so beautiful. How cool that you can be that bridge, like you said, from the physical and the non-physical. I'm also curious, like working with people in mediumship and communicating with their ancestors or people that have passed, are there like common themes that come up with people, things that they need to heal? What are like the most common things that you see people need to work on?
I mean, I feel like every relationship, of course, is different. So every communication is going to be different. But because we are all human, because we all go through the same things in life, there are common threads that come up within the communication. And a big one for me is maybe where someone never got to say goodbye to their loved one. And so there needs to be a lot of healing with that situation, or if there's a traumatic passing for someone and the family are left dealing with that trauma. I get quite a lot of that through my work. And I just feel that the communication that comes from the people in that side is always really the same in some respect of, I am fine, I'm not in pain, there's no illness, there's no trauma. And we still evolve on the other side. So someone, say, has had a traumatic life here and then they've passed, they might still carry some of that emotion with them when they go over to spirit, but they know where they are home, and they can evolve and heal themselves as well. So I think when those themes come up, it's a big impact on someone, and in a way you see it as an unfortunate thing, or a sad thing that those themes have to come up, but they do, because we are all human when we live here, and things happen, broken relationships, all of that kind of thing can happen to anyone. So that comes up a lot. Another one that comes up a lot for me is to do with children that have passed. I speak to a lot of grieving parents and people with children, and that's very difficult at times, because obviously as a medium I have to detach from the emotion of that as well, because
Mm.
who's not going to feel that emotion? But the healing that it brings, the perspective that it brings, is completely amazing. And you said earlier about being the bridge between the two sides of things. It is an honor and a blessing, and it's not something that you can take for granted. You have to always remember what you're there to do as your job. It's your job to bridge that gap. So um, everything's a humbling experience within mediumship for me as the medium, but also I hope for the people that come to see me.
What a beautiful opportunity that people do have to kind of reconnect, something that they think that they might not be able to do, but they can tap into that. So I'm also curious. I know you probably can give tips to all of us on how we can connect to the non-physical because like you said, it's all around us. It's a part of our world. You knew from a very young age that there was a whole nother world around us. Something I always say all the time too is like the universe is constantly communicating with us. So do you have any tips on like ways that we can tune into that guidance and like receive that guidance or just even be aware of that guidance?
Yeah, I mean, I think that that's the thing. I think that people really need to recognize, or hopefully will recognize at times, that we are all connected to the other energies of the universe and our loved ones. And I think to become aware of it, some people are good at meditation, for instance, so they can calm their mind, and take their mind out of the way a little bit. So people that are practicing meditation or doing meditation probably will feel the connection a little bit easier.
Mhm,
Because the problem is that this life that we live here is very busy and very noisy all the time. And, it's the devices that we use, for instance, we're always on our phones or, it's running to our job or seeing to the kids. And it's just a very busy, noisy life. And unfortunately, you have to kind of understand that you need to be in the quiet a little bit
mhm,
to receive the communication because it's very subtle. And I think that people think, well, if my grandmother's in spirit, why can't she just let me know she is there? And it's if it was as easy as that, they would all be doing it, of course, and we wouldn't need to go to mediums. But it's because their communication is from a whole other frequency, and so their energy is very, very fast in spirit, like really super fast, faster than what our minds can really perceive.
mhm,
And so they have to slow that down a lot to even come into our communication area
mhm,
as well. And so that's why when we are maybe quiet or when we are settled, we might feel that communication or feel the presence of spirit so much easier. So I would say, you don't have to be someone who sits and meditates every day. I don't think that's for everyone. I think everyone is different and leads their life a different way. So you don't have to do that, but maybe just in the evening or when you can have that 5 minutes of quiet time, it's maybe a good thing to kind of put the thought out there to your loved one that you want to feel their presence. Now, like I say, it won't be that you have to be frightened of suddenly seeing someone standing in front of you. It just doesn't work like that. But what you might find is that you feel a warmth or you feel the connection or your emotions start to bubble up to the surface. That is communication. And I
mhm,
think that people get mixed up with what communication is because they think it has to be this the conversation, and it's not a conversation. The communication between the two worlds is a love. It's of the soul. It's a presence in the person's life and where they are. So I think to have that, it's just about practice and it's about
mhm,
recognition of when it is happening. Because we do, our minds come into it a lot. So your mind
mhm,
is there to protect you and keep you safe from everything. So basically you might think, oh, I think I felt my dad. I just felt his presence. Your mind's going to jump in and tell you it was your imagination and that it's not real. And so what we do is we say, oh, maybe it wasn't real. And then the father in the spirit side is thinking, oh, I nearly got the communication through. So I think if we can remove our minds from it and just trust,
mhm,
if you felt that, trust that you felt that. Nobody needs to justify that to you. It's something you felt. And I think if people do that more and they are aware of that is a connection, that
mhm.
is a feeling, then they will understand communication better.
I love that. And as you were saying that, I think thought of so many instances where I've done that, like maybe asked my grandmas because they were into the stuff that I'm into as well. I'll talk to them, they're in the non-physical, and then I'll see like the angel numbers that everyone talks about, like the repeating numbers, or sometimes I'll smell like a similar smell, like of their house, or
Mhm.
sometimes they'll just like randomly come into my awareness. And I always like to think that is them talking to me. Are those common examples as well?
Yeah, absolutely. And you're so right. And I think another one that people need to recognize is when you mentioned a smell, like maybe it reminded you of the smell in one of their houses. Um, when spirit do that, they are using your senses to communicate. So it's more often than not, if you suddenly smell something like perfume that your mum might have worn, if you ask other people in the room, "Oh, do you smell that?" The answer will probably be no. And then what it does is it makes you feel like, "Oh, I thought I smelt that perfume." You did, because the mother in the spirit side was using your sense of smell to fill that and to give you that. But it's not that she was putting the perfume in the room for everyone to smell. So I think again, it's an understanding of how spirit works. So angel numbers, things that people see, certain, time on the clock, they always
Mhm.
are aware of it, that kind of thing. It is spirit using what they can use in our physical realm to make that communication happen. And so we need to believe that and trust it. Another one I hear a lot is birds. Like over
Mhm.
here, people call them robins, but I know that there's different types of birds there as well. And people say, I see the same bird coming at the window, it's always at the window. And I say, but you have to trust that that's your person and spirit letting you know they are there. They are not the bird, but they are using the influence of you and your mind to look at that bird, recognize it's a messenger, and understand that that's where the communication is. So there's lots of common signs from spirit that people miss, unfortunately.
Yeah, animals too. That reminds me as well. And just so cool to be open and curious to that. But like you mentioned, our mind gets in the way so many times and we talk ourselves out of it. And we're like, oh, that's just a
Yeah,
coincidence. Do you
yeah.
have any like other tips on like kind of how to ease the mind or go past the mind and tune more into that intuitive part to us that is connected to all that is? I know meditation and slowing down are fantastic tips, but anything else that comes to mind?
I think really, we mention alignment, and I really do feel that if we can, so taking the meditation out of it, like we've said, even just to understand that you are soul, that you're physical, but you house the soul and the spirit. I
Mm-hmm.
think even an understanding of that, even reading a book to understand or asking questions, I do seminars and talks on this all the time. It's just really to understand that connection. And if people can understand that connection, then they will feel everything on such a deeper level. And I think even by doing that, it opens the door to, like you said earlier, feeling the universal energies, even walking in nature, feeling the energy of that. And, there used to be, people used to laugh when people talked about nature or touching trees and, being around, but it's the most amazing thing that you could do to find that connection. So even things like that to help people understand where is that, because I remember years ago before I knew about this, and people would talk about nature, and I would think, how does that, how can you connect to that? Like that's a separate thing. But only through my understanding and knowledge have I understood, no, this is a connection. We are all the same. So I think it's a vast subject, and I think there are many different ways that we can do that, like take a walk in the park, do the meditation, sit down and have a cup of tea and speak to your loved ones and ask them to come in. And remember too that spirit will always, always try to help us. So if we say, look, can you, to your grandmother, I need to feel you around me, or could you come and give me communication? They will always endeavour to make that happen.
Mm.
So it's keeping an open mind. That's the other big thing that I need to tell people is keep an open mind and just believe and trust in what you're asking, and believe and trust that they are there to fulfill that. A lot of it's to do with belief.
Totally. So much power in being open and so much power in nature. I was just even thinking I have a 5.5-month-old, almost 6-month-old baby. And we always joke that like when he's fussy, we take him out in nature and he is immediately just like so at peace. Or we'll even like my husband will take him in the backyard and he'll touch a tree and he's so at
Absolutely.
peace. It's just so cool to see how like children interact so differently with the world than we do. I find that so fascinating.
They're not conditioned yet, you know.
Yeah.
Children are so innocent when they come here, and there's not a conditioning at that point, so they're natural because we come from spirit. Naturally children will act the same as when they were there, so
Mm.
naturally a child will connect quite easily without any prompting. They will connect in that way to nature, or when they're outside it will calm them. It's a natural thing for them to do, but what happens is through then schooling and conditioning and human life, that changes because they kind of lose that connection a little bit because they're more in the physical realm than the spiritual realm. So they kind of lose that. And I think because when we go to school, we are taught to develop five senses, and the sixth sense, which is the spirit, we we don't develop it, and none of that gets talked about. So I think things are improving now, but I do think that that's why when they are young, and I always say under school age, they have such a natural ability to connect, and it is lovely to see.
It is so cool to see. And my goal, I mean, I know it's not going to be perfect because we live in the 3D or physical world and, we're humans, but I'm like, I'm going to try to prevent that as much as I can. So we'll see. But I do find it interesting how we come into this world like that, like children, so pure and so curious. And then we kind of get conditioned out of it. And then we reach a certain point where we're interested, or some people reach a certain point where they're interested in it again. And do you find that's when a lot of people come to you when they kind of reach that curiosity and
Yeah,
they want to connect?
I think so, and I think as well life happens. So things people come to me in the main when they've either lost someone and they want to know where they are, or are they there, or what's happened to them. And they have a lot of, within their own grief, they have a lot of questions maybe, so that can direct someone to me. But likewise in a psychic sense, if things are not going well for them in life, or there's something they're struggling with emotionally, they will just search for answers. So that's when people can be directed to me too. And I think at certain points, like you say, it kind of opens someone's mind. Say, for instance, they are going through a hard time and they need an answer and they don't have the answer, or they're struggling to talk to people about it. Even in that, it prompts them to open their mind that there has to be an answer from somewhere. So it opens them up a little bit. And the same mediumistically. I mean, I've read for people that have been skeptics all their life
Mm.
and absolutely not believed in it, nothing. And then they've lost someone and they come for a reading. Even when they come for a reading, I can still feel that they're not truly believing in this, that they are skeptical still. But I just connect with spirit and it happens, and then the evidence is there in front of them, and it empowers them to a degree. But sometimes it will mean that they have more questions and they'll come back again because then they have more questions. But I love that because for me, I mean, not everyone's going to believe in what I do, and not everyone has a need to believe in that. And some people are just quite happy not really thinking about it. And I think that that's an amazing thing as well, because although I like spreading the word of spirit and mediumship and what we do and how we align and all of these things, it's not something that can be forced on anyone. It's something that they have to come to their own kind of decision with. And I even at my events, I'll say to people, if you're skeptical, that's fine. I welcome that, because why shouldn't they be? Until they have the proof for themselves, or until they feel that, then I can't move that for them. So I think you have to recognize that everyone's different too, and they're at different stages in life.
Totally. That's a good way to look at skepticism. Like everyone just kind of gets there in their own time. When you're ready, you're ready. And then you seek the answers in your own personal path. So that's a great lead into how can people, if they're feeling called, work with you personally? Like what are some different ways they can get some medium readings or psychic readings, and the different ways they can work with you?
So for readings, I mean, if anyone is inquisitive about that or wants to ask me questions about that or book a reading, then they can just do that by contacting me through my website, karenpsychic.com. But if they want to work with me, if they feel that, they have something or they want to see if they have something, then, like I say, I do seminars, online events, but I
Mm,
also do mentorship as well. Because when I was developing my mediumship, what I felt was there wasn't someone for me to ask questions of. So although I knew other mediums in the field by that time, I didn't have a certain teacher. I didn't have someone to say, this is what you
mm,
should do, or this is the experience. And so, even, all these years ago, I decided when I am out there working with this, for me, it's so important to do the teaching side of it too, and to give someone that guidance that they might need, because it's really not an easy path. If you're mediumistic or you're trying to discover your abilities, um, you're you're on your own. I mean, I know that we have, we can Google anything now, we can go online and find anything, but I also feel that sometimes that does more damage too.
mm.
Like in any other area of work, there's lots of things out there that aren't specifically true, or it might just be that it's a myth, or and if you don't know or you don't have someone to ask, then you're going to take what you see in front of you, and I think that ends up doing more damage. So for me, the mentorship side of things is a massive part of my work. So it really is a one-to-one experience. It's only me that does the teaching, and it's only me that you would talk to, and so it is a very one-to-one experience, which is nice.
That's something that has been so apparent in my awareness is like the vast amount of information we have out there. So that's so interesting you say that. And that would be a beautiful gift. Now, I'm just curious for anyone out there listening, like what are signs? This may be a silly question, like you would probably know if you have medium abilities, but are there any signs like of people that they might have those abilities and aren't aware of it for whatever reason?
Absolutely, because again, you second guess yourself, even if you have an experience. So let's say someone um, can has premonitions. Let's say someone feels like, oh, I knew that would happen, or I knew that person would be coming into my workplace today, or I knew that person would call right at that moment. Even in when that's so apparent that that's a psychic connection, that you're seeing things ahead of time, you would still second guess yourself, because you think, oh well, maybe I just picked up on that, or maybe I seen them and it's not been in my mind, or we'll have all these different ways of looking at it. So a big sign for those out there that do have psychic ability and can develop it and work with it are things like that, where you are tapping into other people's energy a lot. So maybe you're at work and there's someone else in the office, and you literally can feel how that person feels that day.
Hmm.
Or you can think you're sympathizing with someone over a situation, but actually what you're doing is picking up on their energy and picking up on the
Hmm.
emotion. And another sign of it, for me anyway, was that I felt quite depleted of energy a lot.
Hmm.
And I didn't understand why. And at that point in my life, I worked in the care profession, and I just thought, oh, it's, work, it's tiring. But really, what I then recognized afterwards was that my energy was used to heal those that I was working with. Or it might have been that someone in my workplace was having a hard time, and I would give all my energy to them because that was the way it was. And it's all done without your knowledge. It's not a conscious thing. So I think those that are mediumistic will feel things like that a lot. And I would also say as well, if you're just feeling a little thing here and there, that doesn't mean that you're not mediumistic. It could just be that you're not recognizing the signs that you are. So I'm
Hmm.
always open to people reaching out to me. There's actually a submission form on my website where you put your details in and you can detail what your experience is at that
Hmm.
moment in time. Why are you submitting the form, and it lets me see what's going on for the person before the next stage anyway. So if you're ever, if there's anyone listening that doesn't know, they're not sure, then just put a form in and I can answer any questions that way, because it is quite confusing when
What
before you know what you can do, it is confusing.
Totally. Yeah. What a beautiful tool that you've created. I love that. Now, I keep thinking I'm like wrapping it up and then questions keep coming to me. So, two more questions for you. Like, that reminds me of what people say when they're like empathic, like I feel like that's another term that people use. So interesting. Do you have any tips for protecting your energy? I feel like that is very applicable and a lot of people need to hear different ways they can protect their own energy.
Yeah, sure. And again, protection is a word that you hear a lot within the mediumistic field. People talk, or any workers, energy workers, will talk about protecting themselves or having to protect. I'm very careful with this one in a way that I would say you don't have to protect yourself against anything that might be detrimental to you. So there's nothing that's going to happen that's going to be detrimental to you or damage you. But to protect your energy, meaning to keep your energy, to not give it away all of the time, is a different matter. And I think the biggest thing that I learned is detach from everything else for some time. So it might
Mhm.
be that I go out to work for a day, and when I come home, I'm putting the TV on. I'm not thinking of it. It could be something quite mindless on the TV. It doesn't really matter. It's just a way to kind of get myself back into my surroundings and just be mindful that I need to preserve as well. Because if you are empathic, if you are mediumistic, you will, not knowingly, but you will give your energy away on a daily basis. So to learn that, to recognize that, first of all, you have to do that work to say, how come I'm feeling tired today? What happened today? Who was I speaking to? What happened? How did I feel? Kind of have to look at it a little bit. If you are aware that you need to protect your energy and preserve your energy, then the best way to do it is to ground yourself in normal life. And always, always remember that when you do this kind of work, I used to say, if I had a day of readings planned and I didn't feel up to it, I would reschedule the readings. Not because I wanted to let anyone down or feel like, it didn't matter, but I knew that if my energy is not on point, then I'm not going to be able to offer what I should be offering anyway. So I used to say to my students, it's like being someone who's physically ill or sick.
Mhm.
You wouldn't expect them to go into the office that day. You would expect them to stay in bed and relax and get better. And it's the same thing with energy. It's just harder to do because we have this thing in us, just keep going, just it's fine. You get through your day, but exhaustion of your own energy is not good. Depletion is not good. So preserve that at all times. And if you do have a day or a week or a month where you are depleted because of your situation or work or whatever it might be, then always be kind to yourself and make sure that you regain that again by doing nice things. I always say nice things.
Mm.
That means something different to everyone, but for me, it's maybe a walk at the beach. It's maybe, a walk in the forest. It maybe is just sitting at home, closing the door, putting TV on, and staying cozy. It's different things for different people, but all of that will allow you to preserve your energy.
I love that. Being kind to yourself. That is something that has been in my awareness recently too. Like, no, we don't need to like work ourselves to the bone and like go work out and lose weight and do whatever with the new year. Just be kind to yourself. Love, love, love that.
I
Okay, my
thought
next.
that I
Oh,
thought
go
that
ahead.
today actually when I was coming from the gym today. You know what it's like, and even if you're a regular gym goer, come January, you've had Christmas, you've had New Year, and I watched people in the gym, and when I came out, I thought, we beat ourselves up so much. We really push ourselves all the time, and I thought in my mind at that moment, I thought, at least you've been today. It doesn't matter if it was hard or it was tough going, you're back doing what you do. And I think that if we can remember to be kind to ourselves like that, it just makes life a lot easier.
Totally. We really are our own worst enemy sometimes. So that awareness is key for sure. Now, my next question is like more personal, but it's just a fun question I like to end with. What is one activity recently, which you may have already mentioned it, that you just love doing? Like time just passes so quickly and you just like go to a different time and space when you're doing that. I call it an alignment activity. Do you have any of those?
Absolutely. Yeah, it is an alignment activity, and it definitely is about the beach, the water, or the nature. For me, that just settles me, it centers me. I could sit in a park. We've got a park near our house and it's just all old trees, big old trees.
Mm.
And I can go and sit there and it's timeless for me. I could sit there for a long time, just in the quiet, listening to the birds, just sitting there at peace. It just, for me, is my alignment. It is where I can go there and feel, okay, things are fine, things are good, I'm realigned again. And like I said before, we constantly have to realign. It's not something that just comes. I mean, as much as we can be the most positive person, spiritual person, we can understand energy, life gets in the way, and it takes the alignment right out. And we are the ones that have to work hard bringing it in. So doing something like that, alignment activity, as you called it, I think is the best thing, the best present you could give yourself. And for me, it's definitely about nature.
Totally. We do have to constantly like recenter ourselves. We veer a little bit always, but then it's just about getting back on track. And I can only imagine, I've not been to Scotland, but it's on my bucket list, how magical your land is and just being outside. It's probably a whole nother level of nature there.
It's really strange because the town where I live, it's just a small town, but we're right on the coast. So we have the
Mm.
beach, water, but we also have lots of countryside. We really are right in the centre of both. And it's funny because when I travel with work now, whether it's over to the States or other places, and if it's in a city, for instance, like a big city, or I I think, wow, we actually take it for granted that we have the beach one side of us and the parks on another when we're in this big city and it's all industrial and all the rest of it. So I think we can forget how lucky we are here.
Yeah, it's easy for the mind to do that. That always drives me crazy how easy it is to take things for granted. But okay, this really is my last question. If you had to leave one piece of advice for anyone just starting on this journey, maybe they feel called to work with a medium or diving into their own abilities, what would that one piece of advice be?
Absolutely trust what you feel.
Mm.
Trust is a massive part of this journey. And I can say that because in the beginning, I didn't trust. In the beginning, when I actually would feel all these things naturally, but when I went to develop my mediumship, all of a sudden it's like it had turned around where I was then questioning things. Whereas before I actively went to develop, it was a natural thing, so I didn't question it. So I think the biggest learning curve for me early in my development was just trust that what you're seeing and feeling and hearing is real. And
Mm.
trust that if you have a calling, even if it's not manifested at that point of communication from spirit, if you just feel that calling inside of you, trust that there's a reason for that. And everything comes from the soul. Every calling comes from the soul, emotion comes from the soul, everything's connected. So if you feel that, then trust that and believe. And even if you don't know your path, I didn't know mine. I didn't just suddenly say, well, I'm a medium and this is what's going to happen. It was more of a recognition of, okay, I don't know how this is going to happen. I don't know where I'm going with this. But I do trust it. I do trust that this is for me. I can feel that. So that's the biggest thing that I would say to anyone.
I love that. I always say, like, trust those nudges, trust those nudges. Karen, thank you so much for coming on the podcast. That was a beautiful reminder at the end. Trust ourselves, trust those nudges. Thank you so much. And I look forward to connecting with you in the future. And anyone that feels that nudge, will leave all your information linked in the description and they can connect with you. But thank you.
Perfect. Thank you so much for asking me. I think these kind of podcasts are so important to discuss and get the word out there of all manner of things to do with energy and mediumship. So thank you so much for asking me.
Karen, again, thank you so much for coming on the podcast. And I really do love that message at the end. It is really about learning to trust ourselves. I'm noticing that to be a very common theme with all of my guests and with myself, learning to receive that wisdom and trust it. That's a lot of the work that I do in my internal guidance sessions. I help people find that connection and then trust the wisdom that you are receiving. So if you're interested in connecting with Karen or working with her, you can go to her website, karenpsychic.com. Of course, I will link that wherever you are watching this in the show notes, in the description, whichever platform, whether it's podcast or on YouTube, which, by the way, I did move all of my podcast episodes from my personal YouTube channel to their own YouTube channel. I have a whole video on my channel explaining what I did. It just helped me reconcile where I'm putting all this stuff in my brain. I wanted to have two separate spaces. So you can still watch the podcast on YouTube, but it now has its own channel. It's connected to my personal channel where I'm still uploading yoga flows and meditations and fun videos up there, but they now have separate spaces. So thank you guys as always for joining me today. If you're new here, please subscribe. We have new episodes every week, sometimes twice a week, depending on what is going on. And we're always talking about what it means to live basically your best life, your most aligned, present, fulfilling, happiest life. So if you're into that, please subscribe, share this with anyone else that you think needs to hear this message. Leave a review if you feel inspired to. It takes 30 seconds and really, really helps the podcast grow. And I'm just sending you all so much love, all of the highest vibes. And of course, I will see you in the next episode of Alignment Adventures.